All right, well, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about my personal favorite tool, which is this thing right here, your iPhone. And so the reason why this is one of my favorite tools is it is just so functional. It is something you're always going to have on your pocket. You always carry it around, and so it's easier to take photos and not come up with excuses of why you're not going to take them today because you don't want to deal with carrying your camera. So to start off with, the pros of an iPhone camera is, the main one to me is that it's always in your pocket. And so there are so many shots I have, and I've even sold some where I wouldn't have gotten that shot if I hadn't had my phone with me. The other thing I do find, besides the portability, I'm honestly blown away by the image quality. I've been playing around a lot recently with how much you can crop in and how much the image actually has. And obviously it's not quite as good as something like an R5. You can't crop in quite as much. You do run into some pixel issues, but it's not so bad that I would say it's not a tool. The other amazing thing about it is that you have a remarkable amount of actual good glass on it. So if anyone doesn't know this, I'll just break it down real quick. But essentially, when you're zooming in with an iPhone and you're just digitally scrubbing and not using those three lens categories, you actually aren't zooming in, you're just making the pixels bigger, if that makes sense. And it kills your image quality. So I would say never do that unless you really need it, and then just accept that you're not going to have as good or even okay image quality. Now, if you're going for a certain look, that might be okay to you, but for me, most of the time, it's not really acceptable. So what I find is there's the 0.5, there's the 2x zoom, and then the 5x zoom, and the rough, I'll throw those up on screen, but I believe it's 14 to 115 millimeters, which is a decent amount. You actually feel, I'm actually blown away by how much you can zoom in, and it's not as, I don't know how they do it. I'm assuming it's a software thing, but it doesn't feel as, it feels a little bit longer than the actual millimeter is, and it still looks decent, which is pretty impressive. I will say with phones, honestly, I've been blown away with the low light performance as well. I've done 3-second exposures with this phone specifically. This is iPhone 16 Pro. And I've just been blown away by how good the shots look, even using a 3-second exposure where you're not using a remote trigger, and where you, at least for me, I've been holding it in my hand, which is not something you should probably be doing with it, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and it still looked phenomenal. And what I will say, and this is the issue and why I don't shoot more on a phone, is that if you're shooting anything fast moving and small, it doesn't track very well. It gets pretty out of focus pretty fast. And mind you, this isn't, I think for most people, this wouldn't be a huge deal. If you're shooting, for instance, like cars, or even people walking down the street, I don't super notice it. Maybe every once in a while you'll get a little bit of it, but overall it's pretty solid. What I will say is you do start noticing it when you're shooting, for instance, I shoot a lot of mountain biking and skiing, and so you do start noticing it then. But to be honest, those are pretty harsh conditions for any camera. Even the R5, which has some of the best in class autofocus, even then it doesn't get it every time. And I frankly don't use the autofocus a lot of the time. I just use a pre-focused spot, which I guess is still autofocus but not tracking, just because it is so hard, because you have things moving very quickly through patches of woods oftentimes, which means that the lighting is very irregular and weird, and it's a whole thing. But for most things that people are doing, I doubt you would notice it that much. Now, The other downside to me of an iPhone camera is simply that you don't have, besides the speed, is that you don't have a lot of the adjustability on a camera. For instance, on every DSLR, mirrorless camera, whatever you shoot on, every single camera you've ever used as an actual camera made for photography is going to have some sort of manual exposure, which means you can adjust the ISO, you can adjust aperture, any of those settings on your camera you can adjust. iPhone kind of has a way of doing it. It's pretty clunky, and it really only changes ISO, and I frankly just don't love it. There are apps you can use. I have no experience with those apps, but I've heard good things about it. I only have experience with iPhone or Apple products, so I'd be curious how different other cameras compare to it. The other thing I will say is a negative, for me at least, in an iPhone, is that one, the color doesn't look as good even before editing. It's just not the same. It feels a little more processed, if that makes sense. Like the R5 much, obviously it's not film, so it's not quite as good, but it feels much more closer to what your eye sees, and the iPhone has been digitally processed before you get the last photo, so it doesn't look the same. And honestly, for me, like looking, and I'm a photographer, so I see this all the time, but looking at iPhone images versus just raw straight out of the camera versus R5, it looks really good. They're really close. I can just barely tell. It would actually be interesting, and maybe I'll do a video on that, but just to do a side-by-side comparison, take the exact same photo and have people see it blind, and I'd be curious what people would know. But the biggest thing I really notice is that when you start color grading the footage from an iPhone or photos from an iPhone versus color grading an R5, you just have so much more color that you can pull out, and the end product looks a lot better. iPhones now, the 17 Pro shoots 6K open gate, floodgate, which is insane. Not even a lot of cameras, like professional level cameras, don't even shoot that. My camera shoots 4K. It shows a ProRes RAW, which is a RAW photo. It's still, I played around with both the RAW coming out of the R5 and the RAW coming from an iPhone, and they are not the same. I'd be curious to know what makes this a RAW photo, just because it is a lot more digitally processed in period than the R5 seems to be, and maybe that's just me mistaking it, and it's really just picking up more information on the R5. I'm sure there's a part of that. So if you would let me know down in the comments what you learned, or if you have any knowledge on that, I'd be really interested. But I guess my main thing would just be that don't be afraid of using your iPhone, because it really is impressively good. And also don't, if you're starting to get into photography, you're new to it, honestly, iPhone or whatever phone you're using, they're all pretty good at this point, is a great place to start. Because my reasoning here is that when you're just starting out, you're not necessarily shooting manual, you're not adjusting your lenses a lot, you're not doing all the little nitpicky things. Most of people are really just learning how to, properly compose and make a picture that looks pleasing to the eye, and editing. And so you're not necessarily going to notice most of the time, or even be able to take advantage of a lot of the higher level tools that a full DSLR or mirrorless camera gives you. And so an iPhone is a great place to start, and it's a lot more cost effective. You're going to have this phone in your pocket anyways. And even like I shot on an iPhone X and an iPhone S for a long time. I never used photos or sold any from the S. The X I did, got clients off of those photos, and even sold some on sites like Shutterstock. But they really are amazingly good for what they are. And I mean, I have a little R50 as kind of like a backup camera and just travel camera, because I don't necessarily want to be walking around carrying a $6,000 setup all the time. And so it's nice to have that. And that one's just, the R50 is a great little camera. It's nothing fancy, but it is great for what it is. And I just have the kit lens with it, and it still costs $700, which is as much as a phone's gonna cost or close to it. And a camera, you only have one use to it. So especially if you're starting out, it's a great tool to just take it. And if you're a pro as well, just take advantage of your iPhone and then upgrade to other tools later down the road as you get more serious, or it's just a natural progression. You will find yourself being like, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that on that camera. For instance, I started off with a Rebel T1i, and then I started shooting more and more very fast moving stuff instead of just landscapes in very tricky lighting conditions, and I just grew out of the Rebel. It did not fit my needs, and it was not capable of taking the pictures that I wanted or that I saw other photographers taking. So I would just say, forget about the stigma or however you want things to be right, and just focus on a tool that is going to be easy to use and very portable in some ways, because it's great to have an R5, but if you're never going to carry it anywhere, or every time you use it you just get stuck in the settings and don't really take as many pictures, what's the point? And even if you know the settings, just not being afraid to take shots with the iPhone and just using it all the time, you're going to get more practice and more photos than you would if you were so determined to shoot just on whatever high-end camera you have. So I would just say a word, but throw away your ego and really just focus on the art of it and not necessarily the tools, because the tools will come as the art goes, is in my opinion. Because if you're really progressing and you're getting better, it's just going to happen naturally. So as always, comment and let me know what you learned, or if you have any ideas of your own. I'm always interested in what different people are doing, and hit the link to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching this video. Have a good day.